6 players to pick up this week, starting with Kyle Manzardo, first baseman for the Guardians. He's a highly anticipated prospect. He was 24th on James Anderson's fantasy-focused rankings here at RotoWire. He's a hit-over-power first baseman, although he doesn't have no power by any means. In his minor league career, he averaged 30 homers per 600 plate appearances while hitting .287 with a 17.5% strikeout rate. So he should be putting the ball in play quite a bit while hitting for decent enough power, even if that ends up more like 20 homer power at the big league level. Manzardo in another organization probably could have gotten the call on opening day. He had to wait for this week here in Cleveland, and he hasn't gotten off to a great start, so that could keep the bids from getting out of hand this weekend. Assuming he doesn't get sent down in a week or so, if his brief early slump continues, the DH job should be his going forward, so he should be quite a good option for plenty of teams. Next, Ivon Herrera, catcher for the Cardinals, is now the starting catcher for the Cardinals for at least the next 10 weeks or so, after Wilson Contreras needs surgery to repair his fractured forearm, which he suffered when JD Martinez hit him on a catcher's interference play, unfortunately. Tough blow there for Contreras, but Herrera is someone who probably would be on far more teams if he wasn't stuck behind Wilson Contreras on the depth chart. He's a strong offensive catching prospect, only hitting .232 so far and slugging .377, but the expected stats are far better. A .259 expected batting average and a .458 expected slugging for Herrera gives you some idea of the quality of contact he's making according to StatCast. Herrera strikes out an average amount of the time, 21% so far this season, and he combines that with a strong barrel rate just shy of 13%. That's the kind of catcher who was already getting occasional DH at bats. He probably won't need too many of those now because he'll just be able to start behind the plate. If you can't get Herrera and you're trying to replace Contreras, you could also look at Shai Langlier, who in fact I might look at first. Langlier has an outstanding barrel rate this season of 18.9%. That ranks third among all qualified hitters, trailing only Shohei Ohtani, who last I checked was pretty good, and Riley Green. That strong barrel rate has helped Langlier to 9 homers this season, including a pair to go along with 8 RBI in a recent doubleheader. Langlier is only hitting .209, but his expected batting average per StatCast is .268. So given the amount of contact he's making and the strength of that contact, he actually should have a pretty decent batting average to go along with quite a lot of power. He cut his strikeout rate from 29% last season to 22% this season. If that holds along with his power, that's quite exciting for a catcher. Moving to the outfield, Johnny DeLuca for the Rays is an interesting player who was traded to Tampa in the Tyler Glasnow deal. Everyone in Tampa Bay has playing time related questions outside of 1 or 2 players, although so far DeLuca has made 7 straight starts, some in center field, some in corner. DeLuca's season debut was delayed by a broken right hand that he suffered back in March, but he certainly hit the ground running in 7 games so far, 1 homer, 2 steals, just 2 strikeouts as well, so making a ton of contact. And the projections call for a slightly to solidly above average hitter who also has some power and some speed. That's the kind of player who's quite interesting for fantasy purposes. As long as DeLuca remains in the lineup 5, 6, 7 times a week rather than just 3 or 4 like many Rays, you're going to want him on your team. Speaking of the Rays, Taj Bradley's making a season debut after a delay due to a pectoral strain, and he needs to do a lot better than last year, at least in terms of ERA. As a rookie, he had a 5.59 ERA. His SIERA was 3.82. His xFIP was 3.83. That's because he had a 28% strikeout rate and about a league average walk rate of 8.5%. Far too many homers at nearly 2.0 homer per 9. That is what led to an elevated ERA, but that's a stat that doesn't tend to remain that high in consecutive seasons as long as Bradley doesn't have some serious inability to generate ground balls, and that doesn't seem to be the case. There's some risk that he gets jerked around by the Rays, bounces between the majors and the minors, but this is quite a talented young pitcher we're talking about, and so if he pitches well, the Rays are not going to want to get him out of the rotation. One final young pitcher, Robert Gosser, is making his MLB debut immediately after I finish this recording, and there's no guarantee that he sticks in the Brewers rotation after that start, so keep an eye on the news with him. But if he is still here, and this isn't just a spot start in place of Freddie Peralta, who's serving a brief suspension, then Gosser could be pretty interesting. And hey, the back of that Brewers rotation, Joe Ross, Colin Ray, there's some some guys who don't necessarily need to stick there for the rest of the season if Gosser proves that he deserves a spot. Gosser is a pretty interesting prospect, though he's not an elite one. He's outside the top 100 here at RotoWire, and maybe more of a back-end starter. But 29 outings since the start of last season at the AAA level. He's combined a 28.5% strikeout rate with about an 8.5% walk rate. That's enough promise that I want to take a shot, again, provided that we hear that he is going to stick around in this rotation and isn't just up here for one outing. For more names, check out the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, hosted by me and my co-host Ryan Boyer.